You know, if you're watching the news 24/7, global conflicts can seem, well, just chaotic. But what if there's a totally different way to look at the US-Iran situation? Today, we're going to dive into a specific strategic analysis that argues for taking a much longer view, one that tries to cut through all that daily noise to see the bigger game at play.
Right, and this quote really gets to the heart of the source material we're looking at. The whole argument is that to truly understand what's going on, we've got to stop getting caught up in the minute-by-minute drama and instead just zoom all the way out to a much broader, more historical perspective.
Okay, so here's our game plan for breaking this all down. We're going to start with the two competing ways of looking at this whole thing. Then we'll dig into the analysis of Iran's military situation, who this perspective sees as the geopolitical losers, why it argues America came out on top, and finally, what all this could mean for the future of the Middle East.
All right, first up, the analysis frames this whole thing as a clash of perspectives. It's not about a battlefield, really, but a conflict in how we even think about these events, pitting that immediate emotional gut reaction against the slow, deliberate, and often invisible march of long-term strategy.
And here's how it really breaks down those two mindsets. On one side, you've got the 24-hour cycle, which, according to this argument, is all about politics, emotion, the flavor of the day. But on the other side, you've got this long view, which this analysis says is all about the cold, hard facts, the empirical, strategic results that you can only really see when you look back over time.
Okay, so let's dig into the first big piece of evidence in this argument, a really stark assessment of where Iran's military and its leadership stand right now.
I mean, the source puts a staggering number on the table here. It argues that basically half a century of military investment, we're talking up to $500 billion in stuff like missiles, drones, ships, has been, for all intents and purposes, just gone, wiped clean off the board.
And, the argument here is that it goes way deeper than just losing a bunch of equipment. The analysis claims that the entire command structure has been shattered, pushing leadership way down the ladder to second and third-tier people. This creates this huge power vacuum at the top where nobody is clearly calling the shots.
And all of this, according to the source, creates this incredible internal paralysis. You've got these four big groups, the guard, the politicians, the clergy, and the army, and they're all looking over their shoulders, terrified of each other. But they're also terrified of a popular uprising. So they're trapped, right? If they look too friendly to the West, they're a target at home. But if they look too weak, the people might just rise up.
All right, so from there, the analysis zooms out to look at the global ripple effects. And from this long view, it identifies a few very clear losers on the world stage.
And first up on that list, Russia. The source material argues its position in the world has been seriously weakened, and for a couple of key reasons.
So the picture being painted here is of a Russia that's really stretched thin, kind of isolated. It's bogged down in Ukraine, which is a massive drain. Its influence in other parts of the world, like the Middle East and Latin America, has supposedly just vanished. And a really big one, that critical drone supply line from Iran, gone.
Okay, next up, China. The argument here is that these events have really put them on the back foot.
So according to this analysis, the setback for China is kind of twofold. First, its ability to get Iranian oil is now basically at the mercy of the US Navy. But maybe even more important, this whole thing was essentially a real-world tech demo of American military muscle, especially with drones. And the argument is that forces China to press pause and seriously rethink any potential move on Taiwan.
And finally, this analysis saves some of its most pointed criticism for Europe, painting it as another big loser in all of this.
The picture we get from the source is one of a really fractured, almost paralyzed European response. You've got key allies like Spain, France, and Italy apparently saying no to military access. And then you have a NATO member, Turkey, supposedly siding with Iran. The bottom line from this perspective is that it exposed the alliance as NATO in name only.
Okay, so after running through all the so-called losers, the analysis then pivots to make its case for who it sees as the primary winner, and that's the United States.
So what's the core of this supposed win for the US? Well, it's pretty simple. It achieved its goals without a single boot on the ground, avoiding another messy, costly war like Iraq or Afghanistan. According to the analysis, the battle was fought on America's terms. It neutralized Iran's military threats and this is a big one, it might have just fanned the flames of internal anger that could, maybe, lead to a change in the regime itself.
And to really frame what that could mean, the analysis pulls out a pretty powerful historical parallel.
It suggests this could be like the fall of the Berlin Wall. You know, the full impact might not be immediate, but the seeds have been planted for a massive, transformative change within the next couple of years.
All right, so for the final piece of the puzzle, the analysis looks ahead, and it zeroes in on the one resource that shapes everything in the region: oil. It lays out a vision for how the entire power dynamic around energy could be on the verge of a major shift.
The core argument here is that the world is actively engineering a future where the Strait of Hormuz goes from being Iran's greatest asset to its biggest liability. How? Well, first, by building alternative routes, new pipelines that bypass it altogether. Second, the strait becomes less of a global choke point and more of an Iranian problem, since it's mainly for their oil and Iraq's. And third, the world just starts looking elsewhere for its oil, to the US, to Venezuela, to Russia.
So, when you boil it all down, this entire analysis is really a challenge to us, right? It's asking us to step back from the daily noise and consider the lens we're using, and it leaves us with this really critical question. When we're talking about the grand chessboard of global power, is this long view, is that the only view that really tells us who's winning the game?